Right. So it's been a while since I talked about practice, about meditation. A lot of my recent videos have been about music, some recordings. I'm going to talk today about the practice of sitting and how sitting, the pose, fits in with practice. It's kind of where I'm at right now. I found myself returning to some basics, some fundamentals around pose and around focus, posture. And I thought maybe it would be helpful or interesting. So in general, here's the thing. So earlier in the year, I was off work for 10 weeks and um, recovering from surgical recuperation. It was health related. And through those 10 weeks, I uh, really built up um, a pretty solid daily practice. I took advantage of the fact that I couldn't do a whole lot of anything else. So I meditated a lot, I studied a lot, I listened to a lot of Dharma talks. I probably spend 4 or 5 hours a day in some form of practice. Maybe an hour and a half of seated practice through the day, and then these other things, reading or listening or study, Dharma study. And then I started back to work, and I thought, uh, it's this has been a learning, unlike it's been a very profound experience, right? That level of practice. It made me start to think that uh, I could shift my perspective, and instead of being someone who toils away in a corporate office and meditates as I find time, what if I flipped that and said, I'm a practitioner first and foremost, and it is from that basis of practice that everything else I do comes from, uh, including my work, which is relatively stressful in the way that um, an office job can be. It's not physically stressful, but it can be emotionally and mentally tough. Uh, what if I thought of those as opportunities for, or as part of practice? Shift the fundamental. So it's now the middle of September. I've been back to work for 3 months. I've been back to work as long as I was off work. And I haven't really been able to pull that together. I still get a good practice in the morning, um, but not as regularly because I'm sleeping late because I am tired. Uh, so it hasn't been holding together. This potentially really rich shift in perspective hasn't materialized, hasn't manifest. I haven't been able to maintain it. So, uh, so I thought, well, let me strip down to the basics. Let me revisit from the beginning what it is to sit, focus, sit and observe, to sit and let be. And underneath all of those practices is sitting, so the pose. One of the things that I learned in my hiatus, in my 10-week recuperation, was um, it is better, it's important to hold the pose through the session, however long that is, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I never sat longer than 30 minutes at a time. 30 minutes, I might take a break and then come back. Um, Within that session, I think it's important to hold the pose. Uh, if you move during the pose, it's not the end of the world. Um, and sometimes you have to. But uh, the vow that I make when I sit is to sit still, to not move. I want a still body so my mind can still. But along with that, then, this is one of those basic realizations. I have to find a pose that I can start off with that I know I'm going to be able to sustain. So I have a lot of problems with my left knee, and those are real physical problems. I know I've talked about my left knee as kind of an avatar of my own fidget mind, and that is true. That the first avenue that my monkey mind, my ego, takes when it wants me to break concentration is it will tell me my knee hurts. Well, but often my knee does hurt, particularly if I'm in a tighter half lotus. I've never been able to get into a full lotus. My knee really does get hurt. So don't sit like that, I tell myself. Find a pose where, yeah, it may look a little sloppy. My left leg is out a little bit, in the cross leg. I have a cushion to bolster it. Maybe I won't need that forever, but for now, I do. If I do that, I don't have to worry about that. I know I can hold that pose. I know then that if my messaging tells me that things are wrong, the chances are it's just bullshit, and I can sit through it and breathe through it. So I find a pose that I know I can hold, that is comfortable, but not too comfortable. If it was too comfortable, I would become drowsy. My mind would become slack. And, along with this sort of thinking of the pose, the image of the well-strung bow or the perfectly tuned harp is really resonating with me now. That image is one that's often used teaching about meditation poses. You want a pose that is where your body feels like a bow that could shoot an arrow, or like a harp that plucks a beautiful sound. So my pose needs to be comfortable enough that I can sustain it, but not so comfortable that I'm just loose, goofy, giddy, unfocused. Right? There needs to be a bit of tension, but there cannot be so much tension that I'm distracted by the struggle to hold the pose. So find this place where that balance exists. It probably is not a classically formed lotus pose. Some of us are flexible naturally and need to get into that pose so that they experience that level of tension. I don't need to get that far to experience the tension. If I get into a full lotus pose, I will break a knee. I won't be able to meditate because I'll be too focused on the tension of the pose. That's not the intent of the pose. The pose is to be balanced, tight, taut but not tight, and stable. So use a bolster if you need to, so that your knees, butt, base of the spine are resting solidly. So then you're the sort of well-balanced, rising up from the ground. The spine naturally straightens through the tip of the head. Chin is down a little bit. And then the shoulders can sort of like this yoke on the axis of the spine, and they can relax. And the way that we're taught in Bon tradition, the hands are like this, thumbs on ring fingers, and then crossed and resting it just below the navel, but not held up. There's no energy required to hold the hands up. And like this, there's a nice round, circular feeling here that sort of fits it in, through the axis. And then the spine is up, chin down, eyes open on a point. And that pose, that pose creates a feedback loop with the mind. Because when the body is alert, but neither distracted by tension, nor um, drowsy by inclination. The mind reflects that same state, and the thoughts that arise are not grasped after, because the awareness, the mindfulness, is alert enough to be aware of the thoughts, but not tight grasping them. Alert enough to be aware of the thoughts, but not droopy and uh, unaware, not seeing them. So the body and the mind start to feed into each other with these states of relaxation and focus. For me, the body relaxes first a little bit, and then the mind chills out. The mind chills out and stops sending these sort of anxious messages, and so my body chills out, and then my mind goes further and my body goes further. For me, it really begins uh, with that elegant, balanced, precise pose. Even if it doesn't look elegant, balanced, and precise, it has to feel like that. And my ability to move my body and the different postures. Look, the lotus pose is aspirational to move towards, because the lotus pose is a beautiful, wonderful expression of that equipoise. But it's not available to me. Does that mean I shouldn't meditate? No, it means I need to take what's the essence of the pose, which is the sensation of the pose, and find what I need to do to create that pose. So let's see. My goal here is to uh, recognize that I had a window of time that was really a gift. I wasn't well, right? I was recovering from some surgery. I was in some discomfort. But the upshot of all of that was that I had time to really develop a meditation practice on a daily basis that I've never really done before. It was a wonderful alignment of time and opportunity and aspiration. Now my aspiration is to um, re-invoke that feeling uh, while still working. I have a full-time job, I have a family, I have dogs, I have responsibilities. We all have responsibilities. We all have a thing. Uh, I have found for most of my life, it is the thing that defines me, not the practice. Uh, so right now my practice is focused on um, pose, posture, breath, mind, the cycle. And I'll get back to the headier realms of Dzogchen visualizations. I'll get back to all of those. But right now, my focus is sit, focus, be. Anyway, you all let me know how you're doing. Drop a note, comment, question, and keep your wits about you.